Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Well, as I told you, we're talking HR with HRMAB right now. And joining me, if Ruel can help me here in the studio, online is our girl, Joan Underwood, who is the president of HRMAB, Barbados Human Resource Management Association of Barbados. And with her, she has a very special guest today, Mr. TJ Schmaltz, who is the president of North American HR Management Association. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Pearson,
Morning.
and good morning, Barbados.
And Merry Christmas to both of you. Joan, thank you for joining me here under the tree. Indeed, let's talk the professionalization of HR from learning from the Canadian experience. Where do we start on this? Let's look pre-COVID, Joan. How would you characterize the history of HR in Barbados pre-COVID?
Okay, so let's go back to 1994, and our Barbadian viewers and listeners will remember that that was a very interesting time in terms of the industrial relations climate here in Barbados. And so, coming out of the Barbados Employers Confederation, there was discussion about forming some sort of body that would help to support supervisors, managers, employers in being capable and confident about the types of negotiations that were taking place with the unions at that point in time. So back then, HRMAB was created, and the primary focus at that time was industrial relations and labor management. Now, also within that time frame, the primary focus of HR was actually personnel administration.
Yes.
And so, right, so the more administrative focus back then. And we have evolved to a certain extent from that exclusive focus on personnel administration and industrial relations and labor management to focus more on other, more holistic, more development oriented aspects of HR. However, we still have a lot of room to go. And one of the ways in which we have sought to professionalize our profession includes having a voice at the national level in terms of policy formulation and also the advances in the legislative and regulatory framework. So HRMAB, coming out of the Barbados Employers Confederation and on its own, has been very actively involved in terms of ensuring that our members are educated and that we invest in our own development so that we can add value to the organizations which we serve and to the nation on a whole.
Indeed. And so, TJ, if we're going to learn from the Canadian experience, I'd like for you to explain for us then the history of HR in Canada.
Yes, certainly. And good morning, Barbados. It's a great honor to be with you today. The Canadian experience has quite a few parallels with what you've just heard around Barbados. Really, it's the 1990s in Canada that we started to talk about HR as a distinct profession, created an association in Canada as well. But the other key component around Canada's journey was also the creation of an HR designation. So a designation that we call the Certified Professionals in HR or CPHR, that really became the starting point to evolve away from the personnel function, the administrative function. Now we're talking about a standard of education, a standard around code of ethics. We have a brand that we can start to talk about, and really to then have a voice for the HR profession that is quite consistent. So that's been the first part of the journey. The next part was really then evolving to talk about HR being a part of advancing organizations, being a part of the strategy of an organization. And really in the last 2 decades or so, we've started to see more representation of HR at the executive level, at senior levels in organization, influencing people practices. That's the gist of our journey thus far.
What's been the struggle thus far in terms of getting that level of acceptance at the board level? And as you heard, Joan said also wanting to be a part of policy change. What's been the struggle from the Canadian experience?
Yeah, I think, the struggle really was at first to define what makes up the profession of HR. There's a lot that can go behind the scenes and being very deliberate around the competencies that are required for good people practices. And even the struggle in more recent years for us has been to tie back the practice of HR to business objectives, to really be clear around how good HR practices can drive business strategy. That's really where the rubber hits the road. This is where you can show the return on investment. This is where you can show how HR and good people practices can help you get to the next level of your strategy, of serving your customers, you name it.
Seems as if the struggle is equal all over the world, Joan. And TJ, from your experience managing human resource management really during the pandemic, because we all had the same kinds of problems, shutdowns, layoffs, and the like different modes of work. How did Canada manage HR during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, really, I mean, this was an opportunity, I think, for the HR profession to really shine and talk about being that strategic partner. None of us had a playbook for the COVID experience. So really, we were thrown into it without a sense of what's next. And yet organizations ended up turning to really two parts of their support. It was the HR teams and often the IT function to figure out how to, turn, operations into remote operations if possible and that kind of thing. But it was that opportunity for HR then to really come forward and talk about, what are the objectives? How do we keep people safe? How do we stay connected? How do we operate in the most efficient manner possible? That was really where HR played a key role. And that's only helped, I think, the profession, certainly here in Canada, take the next steps forward. This is that place where we've shown that we can help navigate that once in a lifetime event, hopefully, and come out the other side starting to look at here in Canada the business recovery and what comes next.
Joan, what about you from your perspective for the Barbados businesses? I mean, I think we've done pretty well HR through the pandemic. How would you characterize it? And then what are the next steps, as TJ suggested?
Okay. So yes, HR has really stepped up to the plate in the context of the pandemic. And just to give our viewers a heads up, next week we're going to take an even deeper dive into HR's role coming out of the pandemic and moving forward. But in terms of where we are now and next steps, you would have heard from TJ in terms of the importance of our having that strategic orientation. And as HR practitioners, where we want to be is in a position where we're viewed by the rest of the organization from the board level right down to the line staff as strategic business partners, ones who can be turned to for advice, that we play a pivotal role in the formulation of strategy, not just implementation, but we're involved from the stage of formulating strategy, and that we ensure that the HR strategy is optimally aligned with the business strategy so that we ensure that the organization has the people, the skills, the competencies that it needs in order to fully execute that business strategy and to secure and maintain our competitive advantage. And so that's why we have opted for 2023, in March of 2023, we're actually going to be having a Strategic Business Partner Bootcamp. There's a saying that if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So we're helping our members to be ready so that whatever comes down the road, we're already in the position to provide the support that our organizations need. So I mentioned the alignment of strategy. Our bootcamp is actually going to have 4 pillars. Strategy is one of those pillars. A second pillar is finance and data analytics. Accounting is the language of business. And so we have to be able to speak that language, to understand that language, and to translate HR issues into that language. And so we're going to be having finance and data analytics as one of our pillars in our boot camp. Of course, we can't move away from the industrial relations and labor management component, so there will be focus on employment law in terms of where we are, not just nationally, but also looking at the protocols regionally and internationally, so that our members are optimally equipped to advise their respective organizations. And the fourth pillar is leading change. The published literature tells us that 50 to 70% of change initiatives fail. And they don't necessarily fail because there's anything wrong with the project management or the technical part of the change, but rather it's a failure to adequately take into consideration and to lead the people side of change. So we will be focusing on what's required to effectively lead change. And one of the first things we have to look at in that regard is at what stage of the process do you involve people in change? Because typically that comes after the decisions have been made. So we want to encourage people to revisit that mindset and to make people an integral part of change from the get-go. Because I can't remember right now who the quote came from, but they said people don't resist change, people resist being change.
Yes.
The problem is when we make people the objects of change rather than involving them as subjects and participants in the change process.
You excite me with the subject. I know I have to leave it right there because time is against me. But as always, oh, by the way, Joan, will you be on Barbados for Christmas?
You know, I'm going to sneak out to Antigua.
Listen to me. I was hoping to trap you again this year, but that's all right. As always, wonderful talking to you folks. You know, there's such an exciting journey really through HR, which is why we have this relationship with HRMAB, because we want to really empower more of you in the practice of human professionals, human resource professionals, to become professionalized. And that's what we're talking about today. So as always, as I say, membership brings benefits. So do join the HRMAB, HRMAB of Barbados, HRMAB.org.bb. Membership brings benefits. You learn from these experienced people right here. Joan Underwood is the president. Today we also had another president, TJ Schmaltz, indeed. And so to both of you, I wish you the very best. Happy holidays, and thank you for joining us on Morning Barbados today.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Likewise. You're welcome indeed.